Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. Today we'll be discussing an important step of research process that we have discussed in the beginning of this course, and this is regarding the data collection. The method of data collection is as important as the questionnaire design and also the overall identification of your research objective and all. Unless you collect your information for your intended purpose or in a proper way that which will be required during your data collection process, so definitely there should be some sort of miscommunication, or there might be some sort of ambiguity in the collected data, and then probably you will not get the desired results. So you have to give emphasis on selection of the data collection method, and for that we will be discussing now in our next 3 lectures on method of data collection, part 1, part 2 and part 3. So for easy understanding, the part 1 will be discussing on the data collection procedure and different aspect, advantages and disadvantages of data collection method for observation survey. In next part we will be discussing on the perception survey, and then finally we will also discuss about the expert opinion based survey. So like that we will try to understand the data collection procedure and its advantages and disadvantages. With that, now we will be focusing on lecture number 26, which talks about the methods of data collection, part 1, that is about the observation type of data collection. Now the content of this particular lecture, or what we are going to learn out of this lecture, we will try to understand the methods of data collection, observation based type, then type of observations, that how we can classify the observation, and then for that what kind of device that you want to use and their drawbacks and their advantages. Now we will be discussing about the advantages of observation based data collection. Also there are certain drawbacks in that observation based data collections, we will also discuss the same. Then different modes of observation, the tools of observations, and then we will summarize our understanding out of this particular lecture. Methods of data collection, especially in this particular lecture we will be discussing about the observation based data collection. So observation is systematically viewing a specific phenomena in its proper setting to gather data for a particular study. So if my intention is to say, for as a transportation planner, if my idea is to do some sort of investigation on understanding the pedestrian behavior while they are crossing a road or near intersection. So the purpose is to observe their behavior. So in that particular case we have to observe it. So in this particular case we are not involving anyone to take their comments or viewpoints. It is just about observing how they are crossing in a particular intersection. Or it may be just you can take other example, like if you want to observe that in a like open market or maybe a street market, that how people are roaming around in those kind of markets. Or if you want to do something at some street food, okay, the choices and how people actually interact with those spaces. So through observation you can get those information, their behavior, their pattern and other phenomena. So this is something where the researcher or trained observer will observe those kind of activity and then finally collect those information for the analysis purpose. Now, importance in this particular architecture and planning field of this observation survey. So, observation methods are instrumental in understanding the dynamics of space uses, as I already mentioned that if it is something that you want to observe, so you can observe how people move in a shopping mall, what are the functions that they follow, or what are the activities they are doing, and then their relationship with the space, whether they require huge amount of space for certain activity, where they need certain kind of transitional space where you do not need to have that huge space. So, for those kind of space optimization, as a designer also you can take those kind of observation survey. Occupant behavior is definitely within a building. If you want to understand their perception about the it may be a thermal comfort scenario, or it may be something like the overall aesthetics of this interior space. So, those kind of observation you can always test. So, it can be in real time, it can be through simulation, but this can also be like done where the observer or the researcher is observing the phenomena, how the occupants they react to different environment. It is also the interaction between people and the built environment. So, it is one example on the architectural and built environment side. The understanding of this particular observation based survey leads to evidence based design decision that enhance functionality of the space, safety, and also the aesthetics, and that lead to even when we talk about sustainability and all. So, this kind of approach can also help to qualitatively measure those kind of aspect. Now, types of observation in this particular case, I have just taken one random photographs from internet, and this is the photograph. So, say for example, if we try to understand that what are the components that we can observe. So, it depends on the observer or the intended purpose. Say for example, it may be a factual observation, that the fact is within these photographs I just want to count the number of people in that particular limited road width which I know. So, I can count that okay, within this particular space, okay, how many persons are there. So, I try to calculate some kind of pedestrian density in this particular space. This might be something like my intention, or else I am trying to understand the social interaction, that this is definitely there are certain kind of shops, but there is also some kind of street food available, and then there is some sort of interaction that is happening, that people are walking, they have nothing to do with all these shops. At the same time, there are people who are also doing some kind of purchasing thing, etc. Or else suppose my intention is to see that the condition of the infrastructure. So, in that case I will not look into this other aspect, I will try to see that okay, in this particular case that we have certain kind of electrical wires that are not properly done, and then that may lead to certain risk, or maybe that lead to some hazard. So, this is some kind of problem that I can identify, or else it may be nothing to do with those kind of observation, that I point out what exactly the flaw in this particular area in terms of infrastructure, in terms of road condition, in terms of site encroachment. It can be a casual observation that each day that we are just moving and we are observing that okay, this area is always getting congested, but there is no such kind of agenda behind it, that why I am observing it, or okay, this is just I am daily I am observing there is something. But the moment you want to map it, the moment you want to actually do some sort of analysis, that okay, this kind of areas are getting congested in like normally in the morning hours or maybe in the evening hours. So that will be much more structured kind of thing. It can be some sort of subjective observation. So in such cases, like I can also uh, look at those kind of subjects that okay, these are different age group of people, or maybe in that case I can also see that varieties of commodities that are being sold in this particular area. So just only with the photograph, depending on the observer, you can extract many information. So say for example, you can see that what type of food that is being sold in this area, or else it is something that here you can see that it is a mixed kind of activity, commercial activity, where you have foods, where you have some kind of some shops like cloth, and then you have shoes, etc., etc. Now if we classify the observation, so it can be classified in many ways. So most common way of classification today we are going to discuss. One is direct observation. So in direct observation, the benefits is it allows for real time data collection and ability to capture the context of behavior and interaction as they occur. So it is something that on site the observer is present and it is happening in real time, is direct observation. Compared to that, we can also have an indirect observation, that is what is happening with this. So in this particular case, none of us in present in that particular location, but looking at the photograph, or maybe it can be a video also which can also show the activity in that way, we can also make certain observations, we can also note down certain activities, certain phenomena. But in direct observation, it is something that the observer or researcher must be there on site of investigation. It provides rich qualitative data and can identify issues not previously considered. So definitely whenever it is some photograph or it is something like videography still having some sort of sense to go back and forth to understand certain activity. But if it is a photograph, so it will be much more constant to that particular frame that has been set. So in this particular case, maybe there might be some other interesting activity on the other side, but that is not being captured, or maybe it is just about the eye level or the focus of the photographer, which will depict certain things very prominent and something is getting diluted. But whenever you are present, so then you use your eyes like as camera, and then you can capture many other information probably which cannot be captured in the indirect observation. Limitation can be time consuming and requires significant resources, and there are certain other issues as well. See, you might have noticed this. Suppose if you have involved yourself in such kind of survey, the moment you are doing certain kind of photography, videography, or taking a note on a busy urban road, then you will find that people are becoming very much concerned, and they can also come and interact that what you are doing. So those kind of things also sometimes mislead the whole observation, or maybe the behavior will not be naturalistic. Whereas if something is happening like you have certain kind of camera installed over there, and then probably capturing without like just making any intervention with the flow and all, so then that can also give certain kind of naturalistic behavior. But there are also challenges. Whenever people know that they are under certain surveillance, so probably they act differently. So obviously we have to be careful about those kind of using those tools, device for the observation survey. And for direct observation, definitely it is time consuming and requires significant resources about manpower, and then probably other devices as well. The presence of an observer can sometimes alter the behavior of the subject. So it is something you must have noticed this. in many cases. Suppose there were certain issues, obviously from traffic police and other road safety point of view, it was like made mandatory that you should wear helmet while you are driving or you are just sitting along with the other one on a two-wheeler. But in many times you observe that okay, people are not using the helmet, assuming that okay, nothing will happen and it is a small distance. But many a times you will observe that okay, the presence of a check post or presence of certain kind of police in between will make a change. So all of a sudden you will find that if somebody just notice that in a particular distance the police is there, so even if we were not wearing or something, so we try to wear that particular helmet. So this behavior is going to change. So this is just different example I am setting up, but similarly, like when you try to notice that how people cross or violate certain thing, and if something is present over there and if there will be a sense that okay, somebody is observing your thing and that may lead to certain kind of violation charges or maybe some penalties, then the naturalistic behavior may change. So this is some sort of limitation for the direct observation. Compared to that, when you think about the indirect observation, so the benefit definitely it is less intrusive. So in this particular case, it is much more like you are not involving yourself into that particular real world scenario and you are not physically present in that case to measure the phenomena. So therefore, that will reduce the observer effect on the behavior of those kind of subjects or the people, anything that it may be the car and all. Ultimately, when we consider the movement of car, it is nothing but the driver's behavior that we are going to observe. It can utilize the existing records or maybe some captured data without the need for the observer to be present at that particular time, and then it is efficient. So you may know that in your city that under different smart city program and all, so there is certain kind of increase in installing some traffic control camera, which is like programmed. In some cases they are also having some sort of image processing software inbuilt, which can easily detect those kind of red light violation or maybe with and without helmet, those kind of detection, number plate detection. So at the real time, like it is being processed in the some kind of control room, and then accordingly the actions can be taken. So this is something again observation, but it is again some sort of indirect observation, because who are making those kind of decision or analyzing the data, they are not present at the moment, but it is again something which is capturing the real time but in an indirect manner. Now the limitations. It may lack the context of direct observation, and there is potential where you can have some missing out of some kind of behavior, which is something which cannot be captured to a photograph. So only photograph will tell some static information, or even the videograph probably will capture certain frame, but beyond that you cannot predict the phenomena or behavior by those kind of subjects or the users. Again the limitation, it relies on the accuracy and relevance of the existing records. So it all depends on the type of instrument by which you have recorded that information. So it may depends on the camera quality, capture other parameters, and then definitely if there is some sort of noise in that particular collected information, if there are certain errors in that, so probably there will be a mistake. So obviously direct observation will have certain benefit, but that may influence the subjects, where indirect there will be reduction in the influence of observer on subjects, but there might be something high potential to miss out certain behavioral aspect. Other way of classifying the observation based survey, that the participant observation. So in this case the engagement of observer is high. So what particular case is happening in this part, that the observer is actively involved in the environment or community being studied, that the observer is becoming one of the subjects, or maybe you can say it's not good to say subjects. So, they will become the part of this particular studied group or maybe the community, so that staying with them, working with them, you can observe. So, in our previous discussion also we discussed this aspect, that suppose if you want to measure the tourist perspective on certain heritage or certain site, so you may also become the tourist, you can just mingle with them and then try to observe their phenomena without influencing much on their decision or their action. Benefit: it enables a deeper understanding of subject by experiencing it firsthand. This can lead to more empathetic and insightful design solution, because then probably when you just interact, when you observe it very closely, then probably you can bring out certain important aspect. So, this is one very important way of collecting the data through observation survey, to take part into this particular in the subject group or the community. Now, the limitation is again similar to that particular direct observation. Risks of observer bias and potential altering of the natural setting by the participating in it. So, say for example, when we are participating, we know that okay, this particular activity is wrong or this is probably right. Maybe unknowingly if I prompt it, because now I am part of those kind of community to be studied, and then if I prompt that okay, this is probably wrong, you should not do it or you should do it. So, that means you can able to collect the naturalistic action or the activities that we intend to do as researcher. Coming to non-participant observation, in this case definitely the engagement of observer is not there, it is like almost low to none. The observer does not interact with the environments, and that is why there will be no chance to alter that particular setting. Benefits is less likely to influence the behavior of the subject and can provide a more objective environment. But along with that, it brings certain limitation, which is like it may result in superficial understanding of that particular context, because many a times when we try to interact or we just get mingled with that particular subjects to be studied or the user group that I want to investigate about their perception. So, probably I can get many more insight. It is not the instantaneous decision that okay, this particular user is doing this, but there might be a follow up action, there might be a reason why that person is behaving like this. So, for that many a times through indirect observation we may miss out certain important aspect. And again in that case it is just about the observer viewpoint, because see, this is something is very critical, because for observation the observer should have sound knowledge and should be something as neutral, so that he or she can portray or capture the actual behavior. If observer will put a perspective and then trying to portray the activity, then there might be some kind of bias. Okay, observer can put certain bias on it and then maybe the data collection will not be accurate. So, that is why it is saying it may result in a superficial understanding of the context and lacks in-depth insight that participant observation in previous case can do. Now, let us discuss about the advantages of observation based data collection. Definitely in this case observation based can be of real time data collection. So, we can observe. So, if it is like just going to a particular street food corner or some kind of some open market areas or in a shopping mall or maybe in a tourist destination, and then you try to observe it through different means of data collection. So, it may be through like videograph, it may be photograph, it may be just kind of making sketch, it can be doing some sort of mapping on it. So, like that you can definitely do some observation survey without really making intervention to this particular user group, or maybe if you want to mingle, so that is another type where you can be a participant in that observation group. Again, in most of the cases, like it is a non-verbal information, so in this case there is no dialogue exchange that is happening. So in that case probably the perspective is set depending on one objective. So if you want to ask somebody based on that, okay, what is their perception about the crossing safety on a particular road, so one may give you some kind of answers, they may give you some sort of rules, regulations what they follow, but actually if you observe that whether they are following it or not, so that can be captured with the non-verbal information. Again it will be like under the naturalistic setting, so it is not like a very controlled environment and then forced environment kind of thing where you prompt something to do and then you just do this kind of observation. So that observation is also there, like where you can do this in a controlled environment where you set up certain experiment and then you try to observe that how the subject is reacting to that. But in those cases mostly those kind of observations are being recorded and quantified through different gadgets and all. Say if you want to understand the cognitive mapping or cognitive ability through some kind of EEG device for certain kind of it may be the aesthetic sensation or it may be the visualization effect of any particular building. So in those cases like you can set up some control environment and you can also measure it. But one advantage of observation, it can also be done in a naturalistic setting. In this case no participant bias can be there. You go for a direct observation and then in that case as because you are observing from a particular distance or you are not really prompting any actions to the subjects or the user group. So in those cases participants bias that through their perception when they want to convey something, those bias will be omitted. It will be much more of the naturalistic behavior that you capture. It has the versatility. So in that case like definitely it will not depend on some sort of language barrier or it may be the context barrier. So observation can be done anywhere. So it will not restrict in terms of dialogue and all, because that is not happening in observation survey. Rich qualitative data, mostly it will be a qualitative data only, but through observation also you can count information which will be like quantitative. So in that case we can have that as well. Unobtrusive method, so in this case definitely you are not going to intervene the participants. Flexibility is definitely you can have a series of method by which you can do this particular observation, and also it will help in cross cultural research where you want to capture, as I already mentioned, that depending on that cultural group, depending on the languages, different kind of ethnicity, so that will not matter, so that you don't need to modify your questionnaire or something, that which is the case of a participation survey or participation survey. So observation survey you can do in a very well manner. Now coming to the disadvantages, definitely one part is that observer bias. The observer will participate in that group and mingle with the subjects over there, so that may prompt certain actions, so which may give certain sort of biases, or maybe sometimes it may be like in a particular direct observation method you are present in a particular environment where people are aware of it and then their naturalistic behavior may get altered. Subject reactivity is that particular point where subjects or the users that we are going to observe, so they are very much cautioned about that particular observation is made. So in many cases you may observe now in street they are using the speed camera, and then there are certain sort of speed measurement dashboard. So whenever you are moving at a speed, it will show that whether it is over speeding or under speed. So in such cases, like definitely in presence of those kind of instrument or maybe the check post and other thing that I mentioned just few minutes back, that may also give certain kind of different reaction to the subjects that what is happening. It is only limited to the observable behaviors, but we cannot understand why it is happening, that is it what is the mental state of that particular observer at that time, is there any other influencing factors for that behavior which cannot be observed. So that can only come when you make a dialogue with this. Yes, it is time consuming, because in that case you have to observe and then try to bring certain conclusion, and that should be repetitive in that case. Difficulty in quantifying the data, because whenever you observe, in some of the cases this is just a qualitative thing that they feel like okay doing this and this. So quantifying that and applying certain statistical analysis straightforward way is difficult, but there are way by which you can also quantify, you can still use those kind of qualitative data and transform it to a quantitative aspect. So we will discuss that with our case studies. Then interpretation challenges is the same thing. If it is something a direct observation and based on that observer, like if the researcher is not itself the observer, there are certain surveyor or observer. So converting those observations and then making those kind of database and interferences, there might be some kind of data gap which can lead to some kind of biasness, or maybe it can mislead the researcher to bring out the actual information. Ethical consideration in both cases, like even for the participation survey and for observation, it is important that it should not be something in absence of certain ethical approval, wherever it is applicable, that you are capturing certain thing. So this is something that you need to follow up. Inability to explore motivation, that okay, we are capturing the actions, how they are crossing the road, but what is the motivation, why they are crossing with the risk, why they are very slow, or means anything, like you can take any other example, the answer for why it's basically very difficult to judge through observation survey. It is something what they are doing, how they are doing, but why they are doing, that motivation part, that why question is left out through only observation survey. For that you need to take help for other methods as well. Then obviously for that you need to train your observer very well, so that there should not be any bias in capturing the information, or there should not be any influence of those observers to the subjects to be studied. So like that you can omit certain kind of disadvantages. So but this will require resources, it will require time and cost accordingly. Modes of observation, it can be naturalistic observation, where watching behaviors as they happen in the natural settings without intervention. Structure of observations is observing and recording predefined action with a set framework. So in this case, something that I have a checklist that I only capture, suppose I am taking example of traffic intersection. Suppose you just trying to observe that how many vehicles from this road will take the right turn. So only your intention is fixed, you are not looking what other things are happening on the intersection, you just try to count that how many vehicles from this particular state A to B are making right turn. So this is much more structured observation. Or else suppose you want to just capture, you make a tally sheet and then in that particular case you observe and then you count that how many people like of say young generation or young age group, just observing without asking them about their age. So based on the perception, if you can just say that okay, male, female, or maybe different age group who are coming in that particular shopping mall. So like that you can make certain kind of structured observation as well. Unobtrusive observations, where observing without subject's awareness to avoid behavior modification. So in that case you don't make your presence in that explicit way or intrusive way, so that subject or the persons that we are observing can make certain changes. Other one is that participant observation that already I have discussed before. Here observer becomes part of the community and then get deeper insight. So, in this case you can get some deeper insight, but there is high chance that you may make certain kind of biases, or maybe you can prompt certain actions, or you can alter the settings and the naturalistic behavior. So, these are the most common modes of observation. Tools of observation data collection, it can be annotate diagram where you can make those activity and you can make some mind map that how things are happening. It may be through drawings, you can make a drawing if you want to study that okay this is the space and then probably people are going in this place maximum. It may be through photography and videography, and also it may be through counting. So, depending on the purpose you can select the tool for those kind of observation data collection. So, here we summarize this particular lecture where we discussed about method of data collection, and then we are discussing about the observation based data collection, different types of observation, direct, indirect, and then participant, non-participant, advantages and disadvantages where we discuss both, and then also we discussed about different modes like naturalistic in a structured way, or it can be a open ended questions. So, on such kind of cases, like definitely you can observe the information without taking any participatory approach from the subjects. Then different tools like it can be a drawing, it can be annotate diagram, it can be photography, videography, or else it can be just simple counting in some cases, especially like the vehicle count and other thing. It is just on that probably you can take help of observation data collection for your research. But what type of setup that you require for your research, it will depend on your research objectives, and accordingly you choose that okay which should better, whether it will be like a annotate diagram or maybe it is just can be done through videography. Accordingly you choose a call, and then if your intention is to know the motivation, it is not just the observing behavior, also the motivation of those behavior of the subjects, then stand alone observation based data collection is not good enough. So, you have to also take some kind of participatory approach, which we will be discussing in detail in our next lecture. So, next lecture is again the title is method of data collection, but we will be discussing on the perception based data collection, and then different medium by which we can do those. So, we will be meeting in our next lecture. Till then, thank you, bye bye.